And I want to start off by talking about having a life verse. Have you ever heard of that, where you pick a verse from the Bible and this is like your life verse? Has any of you ever heard of this idea? Okay, a couple of you, okay. So it's kind of a popular idea to look through the scripture and say, what actually appeals to me? What verse really draws me in? And so a lot of times people will find a verse and they might put it on one of those, I see them now, the kind of reclaimed boards, and they have them stenciled on, right? Or depending on your orientation to life, you might get a tattoo with some of the words from your favorite life verse. But there's all different life verses that people will claim. Here's a couple that I think are very popular. Jeremiah 29. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans for your welfare and not to harm, to give you a future with hope. And another one that is very popular as well is Isaiah 41. Have no fear, for I am with you. Don't be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and give you help and uphold you with my victorious right hand. So these are some ideas on what life verses might look like, but sometimes people will be a little bit of a smart aleck and pick some life verses that they might find some humor in or might appeal to them in a certain time in their life. For instance, if you're in 11th grade, which is a very difficult year, your life verse might be, of making many books, there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Or if you're dealing with baldness, you might like Leviticus 13. If a man loses hair on his forehead, he simply has a bald forehead. He is still clean. Now this relates to the fact that in Leviticus, there's a lot of stuff around who is clean and not clean, meaning who can worship the holy and who cannot. And there's a lot of concern about skin diseases in the book of Leviticus, and they're trying to figure out, is baldness a skin disease? And they decide, no, it's just baldness. You're still clean. And then there is my husband's life verse, because he thinks he's a comedian. Like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without good sense. Now, my life verse is a little more serious. So my life verse is from Galatians 5:1. Christ has set us free to live a free life. So take your stand. Never again let anyone put a harness of slavery on you. So there's all different translations of this verse. One of the translations I like is, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So this idea of freedom is an important idea in our scriptures, and it's an important idea as we have looked over these last weeks and talked about the wide open life. Because being free in Christ is part of what opens up for us that God has more for us. Now, this isn't the freedom like the 4th of July freedom, although the 4th of July is my favorite holiday. This is like freedom from a biblical standpoint, which is about what God in Christ does for us and how God in Christ gives us this freedom. Now, this freedom is what enables you and I to move through whatever life hands us and move into what God would have for us. The scripture talks about it as moving into being a new creation. So this is the freedom that we receive as people of faith, the freedom that Jesus gives to us, and that opens to us this wide open life that we've been talking about over these last 3 weeks. So over these last 3 weeks, we've been talking about what it means to live a bigger life and how God has more for us and how God calls us past whatever enslaves us or binds us or keeps us stuck. And God says, I have more for you. And our key verse over these weeks has been from 2 Corinthians. So let's say this together. I can't tell you how much I long for you to enter this wide open, spacious life. We didn't fence you in. The smallness you feel comes from within you. Your lives aren't small, but you're living them in a small way. I'm speaking as plainly as I can and with great affection. Open up your lives. Live openly and expansively. So the verse that always jumps out at me in this text is the verse that says, your lives aren't small, but you're living them in small ways. It's that idea that we all are aware that many times our lives aren't what they could be, not because of external circumstances, but because of what we tell ourselves. You know, what comes from within us that keeps us limited. It's kind of like the old horror movies where, I don't know if you ever watched horror movies when you were growing up, but when I was growing up, we watched the old horror movies, and the thing you never wanted to hear was when they were trying to figure out, they were trying to trace the call from whoever was trying to hunt them, and someone would say, the call is coming from within the house, right? That's what's going on here. The smallness is coming from within us. It's not what God would have for us. God has so much more for us. The thing is, when we think about this, though, we might go, okay, well, that's lovely. God created us for more. And when we don't live into that, God has some pretty strong feelings about that. It's not just a nice idea. It's actually really important that all of us move through whatever limits us into where God would call us to go. That's what we're going to hear about in today's text. And this is a text, I think the last time I used this text was probably like 10 years ago. I remember it because as the person was reading the text, halfway through they stopped and went, okay? So it starts out great, and then it gets a little tough, but don't worry, we'll explore it all. So Eddie's going to share with us Matthew 18, 1 through 9.
Y'all can follow along above. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He called a child, who he put among them, and said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of these stumbling blocks. Occasions for stumbling are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling block comes. If your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the hell of fire. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Okay. This text is about 2 big things. It's about children, and it's about stumbling blocks. It starts off with talking about children. When the Bible talks about children, it often is not only talking about real children, but it's talking about the call on our lives to be more childlike, which for the Bible means we would be more trusting and loving and lean into God more and more. So if we are like children, we are treating God and what God calls us to do like a loving child would look to a parent. So if God says, I have a wide open life for you, I have more for you than you know, we wouldn't go, I'm not so sure about that. We would instead lean in, we would trust, and we would believe. We wouldn't go, no, I don't think the wide open life's for me. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've caused a lot of trouble. I'm not really sure I could do that. Instead, we would lean in and we would hear what God has for us. So we are called to be like children. We're called to be trusting and loving and believing of what God has for us. And when we do that, the wide open life becomes available to us because we're not having this internal struggle, this debate within our own mind about what's available to us based on who we are. The second part of the text is about stumbling blocks. It's about those things that stop us from being children of God. And Jesus has some very strong words about this. He says, whatever it is in your life that is a stumbling block, get rid of it. It is serious. So whatever it is that stops us from trusting God, from loving God, from leaning into God's strength, it's a problem. And that's why Jesus uses this evocative language. Gets your attention, right? You perked right up with all of that. It gets our attention. Jesus is using the tool of hyperbole or exaggeration. He is not actually saying we should cut off a hand or a leg or take out an eye. Now, how do we know this? You know, sometimes people go, I just do the literal meaning of the scriptures. Well, I hope not. In this case, Jesus is using hyperbole, and we know this because in the first century, there were not a lot of footless, handless, one-eyed Christians, okay? The focus here is that whatever the stumbling block is in your life, whatever it is, you need to address it. It's serious stuff. Now, this is in contrast to what we normally do. You know, if you have a stumbling block in your life, something that stops you from being who God calls you to be, something that keeps you bound to your past, whatever your stumbling block is, usually what we do is we kind of try to ignore it. Have you ever done that? Just hope it kind of goes away on its own. Or we just pretend it's not even there. You know, like an ex-boyfriend you see at a party, you don't even make eye contact. It's that kind of a thing. But the problem is stumbling blocks, they don't often just go away on their own. Stumbling blocks often are huge problems. Now, we all have different ones. My stumbling blocks may not be yours. And certainly my stumbling blocks in my faith in life have changed over the time. What they were 10 years ago is different than what they are now. And we all experience some stumbling blocks that I think are common to humanity in general, but then some that are particular to us. Last week we talked about one of the biggest stumbling blocks, which is the monster of more. So the monster of more is the one who thinks that the more God has for us is about more stuff. And there's this whole branch of Christianity called the prosperity gospel that's about this. But what we're called to do is not to get more stuff in this life. We're called to get more of God in our life and in our heart. That's what the more is about, not the more stuff. The other thing we talked about last week that's a common stumbling block is we hold on too tightly to things. So this little girl is holding on so tightly. Look at that puppy. Puppy is not having a good day. We often hold on tightly to stuff too. We hold on to what was, we hold on to our family, we hold on to money, we hold on to status, we hold on to opinions, whatever it is that we hold on to. And I want to talk a little bit more about this one, what we hold on to in life. And I want to talk about it by talking about a situation a friend of mine went through about probably about 10 years ago now. He came to see me, and he had just lost his job, and he was having a lot of trouble with his family. He and his kids had had a difficult relationship, and he was drinking way too much, and he was struggling. And he basically said to me, I just don't think that God has anything more for me. He was very stuck in the mistakes that he'd made and in his past, and he just couldn't see that there was an opportunity for him, that there was a future for him. And I shared with him something that I had just seen a couple days before. You know how God does that, right? You don't know what to say, and then you remember something God just gave you insight on a couple days before. And so I shared this illustration with him, and I want to share it with you. But I need someone who will be a helper in this illustration. So I promise you won't have to do anything embarrassing, but can I have a volunteer? Okay, come on up. Now, what is this?
It's a $20 bill.
It's a $20 bill. How much is it worth now?
$20.
Okay. How much is it worth now?
$20.
$20. If that puppy in that previous slide came in and drooled all over it, how much would it be worth?
$20.
$20. So what happens to it doesn't change what it's worth. And what I told my friend was, it was the same with us. Our worth, our value as God's children was given and eternal and for always. And even if life crumbled us up, stepped all over us, and even drooled on us, we were still valuable as children of God. So thanks for helping me out. Here's your $20. I bet next service, if I give it to a teenager, I can get it. Right? The thing is, in this life, my friends, we have to come face to face with the recognition that life is going to crumble us up and step up all over us, and that doesn't change our value. And for us to move from our past that keeps us stuck, we need to see that life is going to beat us down, but that we always are valuable to God. We always are beloved of God. So, how do we remember that? How do we move into an understanding that helps us to see ourselves not as throwaways when life steps all over us, but to remember who we are and to remember the life that God is calling us to, this wide, open, beautiful life. I think that what it comes down to, as I think more and more about it, I think the next step has to be ours. And it seems to me that it looks something like we need to learn each morning how to say a deep yes to what life brings us. We can't hide. We can't pretend. We can't be a spectator in our lives. We need to each day, if we want to live this life, we need to begin to learn how to say a deep yes to life. Now, children are super good teachers of this. Go back to our scripture where we talked about children. Children are super good at showing us what a deep yes to life looks like. I was out with one of my girlfriends. We have birthdays around the same time. We went out to lunch together, and there was this little toddler coming down the street, and she was like a spark of life, right? She was looking everywhere. She was touching everything, even the gum stuck on the street. She was bright-eyed. She was engaged. And I was just so drawn in by her. My girlfriend said, that's because you would like to be a grandmother. I'm like, no, I've always been like this, with puppies too, I think. You see that spark of life, that wide yes to life. I mean, she reminded me what I think we all need to remember, is that we're called to live this wide open life, and that there is nothing in our life, there is no obstacle that should rule us or ruin us. Obstacles are bound to happen, and we are not to be ashamed of them. We are not to feel guilty about them. We are not to hide them, but we are to see they are part of our journey, and that God meets us as we say a deep yes to life, as we struggle and deal with and rise above those things in our life that are obstacles. So, what is next for us all as we look at how to wind this series up? What are you going to take from here? So there's a couple things I want you to think about this week. And the first is, I want you to be honest with yourself. Where am I living in the shallows? So if this is about saying a deep yes to life, where am I living in the shallows and not saying a deep yes? Where am I hiding? Where am I not engaging? Now, this will be different for each of us, but something for you to pray about, think about this week. And the second thing, what obstacles do I need to address? So instead of ignoring your obstacle, what obstacle do you need to address? Do you need to bring before God? Do you need help with? There's no shame in that. That's life. We all have obstacles, and God meets us in the midst of them. The wide open life, it's a life for us all. It's a life to be lived not when things are perfect and we have our act together, but it's a life to be lived today. And yes, in the midst of living it, sometimes we will fail and fall and stumble, but we will also soar and shine because God is with us. We are not alone. We have been given freedom in Christ, and the wide open life waits for us all. Let us pray. Holy God, you give us so much more than we often realize. We forget we are your beloved, and that you call out of us all that we can be for your world, so that we might serve, so that we might make a difference in times in which we live. Help us, show us, give to us your wisdom, so that we might deal with our obstacles, so that we might move forward in a way that's pleasing to you and grows your kingdom here on the earth. Today, God, convict each of us of what is the thing we need to give attention to, whatever it might be, big or small, that's stopping us. Because we want more, because you have called us to more. All of this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.